Good morning, everybody. Thank you for inviting me to present today. My name is Jonathan Taggart. I'm an associate with Land Forest People Consulting. For the past 2 years, I've been working with the Nakazli Natural Resources Office on a land stewardship plan that I'd like to present some background and some updates on today. Of course, it would be my preference to be there in person. Given COVID, I can't. So I am sitting here recording this presentation. So this is, it's not live, it's being recorded. So as I say, for the past 2 years, we've been working together on a land stewardship plan for Nakazli territory. Before I jump into the plan, I'll just say a little bit about myself. I'm recording today in Powell River in the treaty and traditional territory of the Tla'amin Nation. Again, my name is Jonathan Taggart. I've been working with Land Forest People for about 5 years. As a firm, Land Forest People has been consulting exclusively with First Nations communities in BC for the past 10 years. I was born and raised in Vancouver. I've lived in Powell River for 2 years. I'm a husband to Mariko and a father to Matso and Yukio. And I've been working with Nakazli since 2016. I started as a PhD student with UBC. So working on a land stewardship plan, a question we get asked a lot is, what is a land stewardship plan? Well, essentially a land stewardship plan is a map of a territory of Nakazli territory. It's a map of the lands and waters, but it's also a map of the community use of lands and waters. It expresses the community vision for how the land, waters, and resources should be used and not used or conserved. And what this map does is it aims to turn community vision into policy or directives about land use. Often that policy is regarding development, resource extraction, particularly forestry and mining. And what that policy does is it says what activities are allowed, where are they allowed, and how much or what intensity of those activities is allowed in those areas. So the Nakazli Land Stewardship Plan in particular is a vision for the sustainable future of the KO. It recognizes Nakazli's role as stewards of the land. It addresses ongoing threats to animals, fish, forests, water, plants, medicines, and it aims to preserve and enhance cultural and natural resources for future generations. Another question we get asked is, well, where does this plan come from? How do you make a land stewardship plan? And like all good plans, it starts with community. Over the course of the last 2 years, the land stewardship team has conducted dozens of map interviews with community members. And the questions we've been asking in those interviews is, what are the places that are important to you? Why are those places important to you? And how should those places be treated? What would you like to see happen on the land? We've also looked to historic documentation of community knowledge and use of the land to bring previous generations forward into this plan. And what comes out of those interviews is what we call a land use zonation, sort of a grouped vision for places on the land. What that zonation does is it brings together places on the land that have similar characteristics or that have a similar community vision. And the three big buckets of those places are places where community would like to see recovery of the land to a better state. The second bucket would be places where sustainable resource use of the land and resources could be allowed within certain parameters. And the third big bucket is areas that community wants to see protected in its current state. And I'll speak a little bit to each of those three. The recovery zone, the way we identified what would become the recovery zone that we see here in red, these are areas that have previously been heavily targeted by resource extraction, and in particular in the southern part of the territory, south of the nation, we're looking at forestry impacts. The policy or the community vision for those areas that has come out of our interviews is we'd like to emphasize the recovery of animal populations and their habitats, specifically forests. And we know also that recovery of forest has significant impact on the recovery of water quality as well. In these areas, as with everywhere in the territory, The goal is also always to protect and enhance the Nakazli's continued traditional use of those areas. A second big zone, or a sort of bucket of places that has been identified, is what we're calling a sustainable resource zone. And these are areas that have not been heavily impacted by logging. And these also areas that have not been identified as either especially sensitive, either from a cultural or an ecological perspective. The community vision for these areas, the policy that's come out of the interviews, is that these are places where extraction, logging in particular, may continue to happen, but under different set of guidelines, under a different set of best practices as identified by the community. Also, areas that will continue to be protected, where Nakazli's traditional use will continue to be protected as well under new guidelines for extractive industry. And the third important bucket that's been identified are protection zones. These have been identified as areas that are highly sensitive, either from a cultural or an ecological perspective. And they're also areas that are untouched by industry at the moment. So areas that are untouched by roads or logging. And we'd like to see them kept that way. So the policy that's come out of our interviews has said, these are places we'd like to see no changes on the landscape. And of course, protect and enhance Nakazli's traditional use of those areas. We put it all together. We put the protection zone on top of our other two zones, and we have a map that looks like this. This map shows different areas where different activities and different intensities of activities are permitted. And this zonation is, of course, influenced by community members' knowledge and use of the cultural, natural, and resources. This comes straight out of the interviews that we've been doing and the mapping we've been doing with community members. And the policy there is driven by community values and hopes for the future of those places on the landscape. And so that's where we are now. And what's next for the Land Stewardship Plan? Well, in the next coming months, we'll be finalizing the implementation report. And this is the document outlines how policy will help achieve those goals that community members have identified in interviews. We're writing more detailed policy directives with the team at the Natural Resources Office. We're also identifying how the Land Stewardship Plan can help drive towards the Nakazli's social, economic, and environmental goals as set by leadership. And happening at the same time, the development of the Guardians program, also through the Natural Resources Office. We're identifying areas where the Nakazli Guardians can help enforce and educate the public about the plan in the future as the eyes and ears on the land. And that's where we are. Thank you, Musi, for letting me speak a little bit about this plan today. Enjoy the rest of your day, everybody. Stay well, and I hope that we can all be together in person very soon. Take care.